Jack Haber lived upstairs in House 2B. It was a 16 by 16 room, large enough for his needs. A 12 by 16 beige carpet ran the entire length of the room, but ended 4 feet from the small kitchen. There, the master had laid down some rather nice linoleum. The linoleum stretched all the way to the small bathroom. In the small bathroom, Jack had laid a simple rug that took up almost all the available space. But it was enough for him. He didn't need so much. He didn't want so much. Jack Heber certainly didn't need the 3,200 square foot house his wife had insisted on buying. At first, he'd objected. It was just him, her, and their 16-year-old daughter living in the house, and they just didn't need that much space. Especially since Deirdre would undoubtedly have to move out in 2 years. Ever since she'd seen the picture of the college campus, all the girl had talked about was going to Florida State University. But Jack, as usual, relented and put down a 25% down payment, $52,500. Then, 2 years after Deirdre moved out, Jacqueline began bombarding him with the usual, "We're estranged," "It's not you, it's me," and "This will help us reconnect." He was puzzled as to how a 47-year-old woman taking a 32-year-old lover was supposed to help them reconnect. But to Jacqueline's surprise, this time, Jack didn't capitulate. He didn't just give up. "You'll be left with nothing," she yelled, and her normally beautiful face contorted into an ugly grimace when he informed her he was moving out. "Fine, at least I won't be staying with a wrinkled old whore," he said, and finished packing his suitcase. Miller's Electronics had sold him the equipment. It wasn't hard to hide them in the big house. Jacqueline wasn't noted for being particularly scrupulous about housekeeping and didn't keep much of an eye on her surroundings. He learned that Jacqueline's lover was a teacher at Baylor Lake High School. That's how they met. Brian taught English and Jacqueline was the librarian. Jacqueline and Brian decided that Jack should just go along with the plan. They would have an affair, then Brian would go home to his wife and Jacqueline would go home to her husband. But Jack Haber didn't become chief accountant of St. Elizabeth's Community Services because of carelessness. He became chief accountant because of neatness and thoroughness. As they had arranged, Brian and Jacqueline went to the Sweet Pea restaurant for a fried catfish dinner. Brian's parents were there, sitting at a table. A confused Brian introduced Jacqueline as a coworker. "Where's Michelle?" Brian's mother asked demandingly. She's at home with the girls," Brian replied, stammering. "Yeah, she told us," his father snapped back. "Said you had some kind of parent-teacher conference at school today or something." Yeah, but there was a little recess and we decided to get something to eat," Brian replied, stammering. "Uh-huh," both of Brian's parents said, letting him know that they weren't buying his lame excuse. After a silent dinner, the no longer quite amorous couple went to Foxtrot's lounge for some dancing. Jacqueline loved to dance, but Jack didn't like it very much. He had 2 left feet. And at the Foxtrot, Jacqueline's mother and stepfather were dancing. "Yeah, honey, your husband slipped Roger a couple $100 and told him to take me here to dance and drink," her mother giggled. Then she looked at Brian and raised an eyebrow. "But what are you doing here?" she asked her daughter. Well, you know Jack doesn't really like to dance, so," Jacqueline replied, stammering. "Come on, Monique, they're playing our song," Roger insisted. "It's not our song, you silly old goat," Monique laughed, but allowed herself to be dragged back to the dance floor. But Jacqueline was determined to continue their affair, if only to show her husband that he wasn't going to ruin her evening. Brian was fine with that. Dancing and dinner were just a means to an end for him. "Gosh, nice house," Brian whistled as he pulled up to the house in South Shore Baylor Lake. "Thanks," Jacqueline purred. They walked into the house. "Hi, Brian," Michelle said from the living room couch. What? What are you doing here?" Brian almost shouted. "Oh, I thought I'd show your wife and your daughters where you're going to live," said Jack Habert as he entered the room carrying a box of things. "Hi, Jacqueline. I just came by to pick up a few more of my things." "I already told you yes," Michelle replied in a suppressed whisper. "After Stacy, I told you that was it." The pregnant woman got up from the too-soft couch, walked over to Brian and gave him a ringing slap. "Looks like you all have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to go," Jack smiled. "The girls really like the pool." "You son of a bitch," Jacqueline snapped at a smiling Jack. "By the way, you all owe Danny $12 for babysitting Millie and Mandy today," Jack said, pointing to a neighbor girl who was splashing in the pool with the 2 girls. Then he walked out of the house. They had almost $84,000 of equity. Jacqueline screamed and cried and begged Jack to forgive her. She didn't want to lose the house or the $17,000 worth of furniture she had managed to accumulate. Her brand new Mercedes-Benz still had 3 more years left on the account. Jacqueline begged, pleaded, and cried for Jack to forgive her. She knew she couldn't afford a car on her salary, and she nearly fainted when Parker Johnson, her attorney, broke the news to her. Jacqueline would be responsible for half of Deirdre's tuition and living expenses while the child attended college. Besides, she was already struggling to make ends meet on a public school librarian's salary. "Oh no, dear," Monique laughed strainedly when Jacqueline approached her mother with the idea of moving in with them. "But it's only something I can do," Jacqueline whined. "Honey, it's a 2-bedroom apartment," said Roger. "I'm so glad your father isn't alive to see it," said Monique. She raised an eyebrow and looked at her daughter. "Do you remember?" Monique asked. "You brought home the boy Jack Heber, and your father told you that the boy was a snake in the grass. How shocked he was when he saw how wrong he was." Their oldest, John Jr., called his father. "Dad, Mom is asking us if she can stay here," JJ said. "Son, you have a room. Then by all means let her stay," Jack said. "Well, I just don't want to. I don't want any trouble," JJ admitted. "Son, this woman changed your diapers, cleaned up after you, fed you all these years. If you have the room, give it to her," Jack said. "Love you, Daddy," JJ said. Michelle Melanson proved true to her word. She hadn't forgiven Brian for his attempt at an affair. Brian realized that it was impossible to live on half his salary and moved back in with his parents. But at least these living arrangements allowed Brian's parents to spend a lot of time with Amelia and Amanda, their 2 granddaughters. And when Michelle gave birth to Barry Melanson, named after her father, they began to see him often as well. "Barry, I thought we were going to name him after me," Brian whined. "We were going to," Michelle snapped back, "but you've made it so that there is no we no more." Jack had planned for the apartment to be temporary, but found that he liked not having to spend hours cutting the grass, raking leaves, mulching the garden, planting flowers, or vacuuming the pool. He found that he didn't have to change the wallpaper, paint the spare bedroom, or tear out the old carpet. Jack discovered that he liked not having to clean the garage, attic, or tool shed. There was a closet in his apartment. He found that it fit 12 suits, 12 dress shirts, and 24 ties perfectly. It also fit 3 pairs of shoes, a long coat, and a short jacket. The small dresser fit 4 pairs of jeans, 12 pairs of underwear, 12 pairs of socks, and 4 shirts. The furniture was minimalist, too. Jack had his favorite chair, 2 bookshelves, a small table and 2 dining chairs, and a full-size bed. He didn't even have a television. He briefly considered using the TV in Deirdre's room, but couldn't think of any TV programs he wanted to watch. Jack Hebert was an avid Saints fan, but Red's Sports Bar had a 61-inch LCD TV, cold beer, insanely spicy chicken wings, cold beer, jalapeno nachos, and cold beer. If he needed to watch a certain TV program, he could watch it on his computer. He discovered that he enjoyed cooking. Jacqueline always yelled that he made a mess when he tried to cook, but here the options were to either cook endless frozen dinners in the microwave or learn to cook. And he learned to cook. Jack was driving home one evening. A work colleague had given him a new recipe for baked chicken, and he was just about to leave the leg quarters when he happened to glance up at a colorful building. Jack drove down the same road day after day, passing this building. Why he decided to look in here at this very moment he couldn't understand. The curtains were open and he stared at the glass window of Kizzy's dance school. Inside stood 7 couples, twirling and gliding. The honking of a car horn brought him out of his trance. Jack turned and pulled into the parking lot outside the building. He sat in the car and watched. An attractive young woman with a beatific smile on her beautiful face showed them a few basic moves and then waved for them to begin. Although he couldn't hear the music, the smooth movements of the dancing people filled Jack's head with music. Then the class was obviously over, with some couples standing around chatting while others walked out into the twilight and got into their cars. Jack made his decision and got out of the car. "Hi, can I help you?" The young dance instructor smiled, pulling away from the older couple. "Yes, you are. So I'm not a couple, but you teach individual dances?" God, it was so beautiful watching them dance, Jack stammered, perplexed as to why he was here. Kizzy smiled wider and took his nervous hands in her warm palms. God, this is your lucky day, she insisted. Okay, Jack said, not feeling lucky. So, let's go see what we can do, Kizzy said, pulling him toward the counter. Nah. He agreed to sign up for the 12-week program and arranged to come in Wednesday night. At 6 o'clock, I'll introduce you to your dance partner, Kizzy said as she handed him a receipt for payment. Oh boy, this is my lucky day, Jack smiled. Even as they prepared dinner, Jack couldn't resist humming the music that played in his head as the couples danced before his eyes. Jack had met Jacqueline Adams at Cabrini High School. She and her family had just moved from Stepping Stone, Louisiana, so her father could start working at the Baggett mattress factory. She was pretty enough, but she didn't stand out in any way among the other Cabrini High School beauties. No, Jack Hebert certainly didn't stand out among the Cabrini School elite. He wasn't particularly handsome, he wasn't particularly rich, he wasn't particularly athletic. He didn't have a nice car, he didn't possess a poetic soul, and he couldn't dance. But he was smart. After weeks of being ignored in the upper echelon of Cabrini High, Jacqueline Adams was thrilled when Jack Hebert quietly asked her if she wanted to go to Jade Garden to eat Chinese food. And after her father declared Jack Hebert to be nothing less than a snake in the grass, a dog in heat, Jack had risen several notches higher in Jacqueline's eyes. The fall ball was being held at Cabrini, and Jacqueline kept waiting for Jack to invite her to it. As that day drew near, she finally asked when he planned to invite her. I can't dance, he admitted to the girl. So she went with Joe Manzella. Suddenly, Jacqueline and Joe were a couple. Jack was a little disappointed, a little hurt. But at the same time, he was practical. They were 18 years old each. They could date whoever they wanted. In a few months, he'd be enrolled at the University of Southwest Louisiana in Lafayette, and Jacqueline would go wherever she wanted to go, and they'd probably never see each other again. But Joe Manzella's smirk was pissing Jack off. Hey, Hebert, how's it going? Joe teased. Oh, things are going well, Manzella, and how's Gina doing? Jack asked, referring to Joe's older sister, who had a reputation for being a slut. Joe was muscular, and Jack was smart. Joe took a swing at Jack, and Jack dodged, allowing Joe to punch him into the cinder block wall instead. Oh, that hurt, Jack chuckled, looking at Joe's swollen arm. Jacqueline had tried dating several other guys in an attempt to make Jack jealous, but then had been forced to admit defeat and go back to him. No, she didn't go to either the winter ball or the spring ball. Jack Hebert couldn't dance. 29 years later in apartment 2B, Jack was looking forward to learning to dance. Chapter 2. It was Wednesday, and Jack wore his burgundy shoes with a medium brown suit, light blue shirt, and burgundy tie. The burgundy shoes were his most comfortable pair. I could have sworn it was Wednesday, Jill, one of the HR administrative assistants, remarked as Jack walked past her cubicle. It's Wednesday, Jack said. No, Wednesday is a dark blue day, the young woman smiled, with a blue-gray tie or a blue tie with yellow dots. Not anymore, Jack smiled. We changed it a little. Is that a new suit? Rhonda, the other accountant, asked. No, it's his Friday suit, said Bill, one of the IT people. Oh, said Rhonda, staring perplexedly at Jack for a moment, and then began studying her computer screen again. No, Bill, see? It's hung up on something. It won't let me go to the next page. If putting on a different suit had caused a bit of a stir in the office, the fact that Jack had left 20 minutes early nearly caused a panic. He drove to Tommy's Po' Boys, a small restaurant next door to the dance school, and almost ordered his usual option, ham and cheese with olive dressing. No, you know what? Give me a big shrimp. Hot sauce, yes, hot sauce on the table. Yes, give me a shrimp and Coke, Jack ordered. He happily ate his sandwich, checked his watch once more, and went into the next room. Nervously sucking on a mint, he stood apart from the other customers. They were all couples. Great, you're here, Kizzy cheered as she spotted Jack. Meet Michelle Melanson, your partner. The last time Jack had seen her, she was 7, almost 8 months pregnant. All he remembered about her was that she was a pretty and plump young woman who had 2 very cute little girls, and that her pretty face was stained with tears now and then red with anger. Michelle Melanson was 4 feet 11 inches tall and probably weighed 170 pounds. Her small face was round, her mouth was a button, her nose was a round nub, and her big brown eyes were round. All of Michelle Melançon looked round. "Hi, Bubbles," Jack said, not even thinking to greet her. And she burst out laughing. "And why do you call me that?" She laughed. "I don't know," he admitted, blushing slightly since they were now the center of attention of the other couples. First thing that came to mind, Neve. He'd learned that her parents had paid for 12 weeks of dance lessons for her. It was a way to get her out of the house for a couple hours. But when Michelle showed up for her first lesson, Kizzy had to admit that they didn't have any male partners for her. Michelle was fine with that. She sat and watched the class, marveling at their moves. "And then Kizzy texted me and told me to come here this Wednesday," Michelle murmured. By the end of the first class, Jack was covered in sweat. Halfway through, he had to take off his jacket. Then Michelle reached her small hand up and loosened his tie and undid the first button on his shirt. She didn't think about it, she just reached up and did it. "There, isn't that better?" she asked as they made another box. "Relax, Jack, let the music move you," Kizzy encouraged. When the lesson was over, Michelle took his hand. "Are you coming here next week? Please tell me you will. I had so much fun," she murmured. "You had fun? Dancing with an old man?" He smiled, lifting his suit jacket from his suit. "You're not an old man," she said. "Twice your age," he objected. "Yeah, but still," she said. "I'll be here." He smiled. Dancing with her, he tried to look into her big brown eyes. She smiled warmly at him, and he blushed. But as she walked out of the building, he glanced her way. As if sensing his gaze, Michelle turned in the doorway and smiled broadly at him. "Did you have fun?" Kizzy asked. "You know what? I had fun. I mean, I know I'm terrible at this, but I had fun," Jack admitted. "First of all, you're not terrible at it, you're just getting started," said the other woman. "And second, dancing is fun," said her partner. "Take care of the latter, and the former will come of itself." "I couldn't have said it better myself," Kizzy agreed. The next morning, Jack reached into the closet for his Thursday suit, but then decided he would wear Wednesday's suit instead. "Now I'm totally lost," Jill teased him as he walked down the hall. He only smiled. His cell phone buzzed, and seeing it was JJ, he answered it. "Dad, do you have— Listen, Shauna," JJ hissed into the receiver. "Is your mother driving you crazy?" Jack guessed. "Yeah. Did you hear the school let her go?" JJ asked. "No, they didn't let her go," sighed Jack. "Yeah, and neither did that guy Brian," said JJ. "Wow," said Jack. "Why? Did she say why she was let go?" "No, I mean, believe me, I asked, but she just said she didn't want to talk about it," JJ said. Jack recognized the statement. Jacqueline said that whenever she backed herself into a corner. She was just saying that she didn't want to talk about it, and repeated the phrase until the matter was finally closed. "And with Shauna, I mean, the baby's due in a couple months," and JJ continued. "Okay, I'll talk to her," Jack sighed. They met at Jade Gardens. Jack couldn't keep from smiling sadly. Obviously, Jacqueline thought it was a date. She had applied a rather thick makeup, squeezed her body into her dress. A year earlier, Jack would have been thrilled to see her in such a dress. Today, however, the outfit looked boring and shabby on an older woman who didn't want to age in any way. "Don't you look lovely?" he said, and sat down across from her. "Thank you, and you look— Is that a new suit?" Jacqueline said. "Yeah, I wore the wrong suit the other day and almost everyone had a heart attack," Jack grinned. "I realized I was getting pretty predictable, so I gave all my old suits to Goodwill and bought all new ones." "Well, that must be nice," Jacqueline muttered bitterly. "Yeah, it's nice," Jack agreed amicably. The waitress came over and asked if they were ready to order yet. "You know what, Jacqueline? I know exactly what you're going to order. You order the same thing every time," Jack said. "But I'll bet you $1,000 you can't tell her what I want." She looked at him for a long time, trying to remember what he usually ordered. "Are you ready to order?" the waitress demanded again. "She'll order the spring rolls and sweet and sour pork, right?" Jack said. "That's right," replied Jacqueline. "And I want a glass of iced tea, sweet and sour tea, kung pao chicken, and fried rice." Jack finished his order. "So how are you?" Jacqueline asked. "Fine," replied Jack. "Work is going well. Bought myself a little bachelor apartment. Just told you about my new suits. They've gone up a bit in price since the last time we bought new suits. And Rhonda just announced she's pregnant, so I'll be looking for a temp to replace her. How about you?" The waitress poured him a sweet iced tea, and Jack nodded politely. He listened to Jacqueline whine about losing her job, how hard it was to live with JJ and his wife. Shauna didn't seem to like her much. Deirdre was still resentful of her, but Penelope and Percy were at least nice to her. But neither of them say they have a room, she finished her tale of woe. So get your own place, you're a grown woman, Jack said, as the waitress served them their food. With what? My looks? Jacqueline snapped back. I just told you I lost my job. So, well, if you can't use your looks, then try using your charming personality, Jack suggested. Screw you, Jack, Jacqueline snorted. Just eat, Jack said. Every time they bring me this dish, I swear it's hotter than the last time I ordered it. While Jack ordered chocolate ice cream for her and Neapolitan for himself, Jacqueline started talking about reconciliation. Not just no, but hell no, he smiled. But why not? She almost shouted. None. So I can sit around and wait for you to tell me the next time you tell me that we've drifted apart and it's not about me. It's about you. You just need a little fun. It doesn't mean anything. It's just fun. Will it make us stronger as a couple? Jack asked and sent some ice cream into his mouth. Jacqueline seriously considered throwing the ice cream at him into his fancy new suit. The waitress returned and placed the bill on the table. Jack quickly checked the slip of paper and placed the credit card on the small tray. The sullen woman immediately withdrew. Maybe it's the hormones, Jacqueline suggested. I'm getting older after all. My periods are getting less frequent. And instead of going to Dr. Pelier and talking to him about it, you decided to have fun with another man, Jack said, and signed the bill, adding a 15% tip. But he was so understanding because you've never been so busy, and Brian, Jacqueline whined. I was always so busy with all the nonsense you decided to do right then and there, Jack said, and rose to his feet. I was always too busy driving our daughter around. He shook his head sadly. You know what I haven't heard? I mean, I've heard all the bullshit. It's my fault. It's the hormones. Brian listened to you, Jack said. But not once have I heard Jacqueline say she was sorry. Not once have I heard Jacqueline say it's her fault. But I am sorry, Jacqueline said quickly. JJ and Shauna need that bedroom for their baby, Jack said. So you need to find yourself a small apartment. And there's a program at the St. Elizabeth Courthouse that will help you find a job. Take advantage of it. Jacqueline burned another bridge behind her. Back in the small bungalow where JJ and Shauna lived, she yelled at Shauna, calling the girl a black bitch. Thank you, Daddy, JJ said bitterly into the phone receiver. No, I talked to your mother and told her you needed that room for the baby, Jack objected. Anything she said or did after that, that's on her conscience. Jack nearly caused another panic at St. Elizabeth Community Services when he showed up at the office on Friday. Instead of his usual brown mid-length suit, he wore khakis and a button-down shirt. But when Jack walked out of the office at 5:10 the following Wednesday wearing tight blue jeans, a blue shirt and loafers, and his suit slung over his shoulder, a slight seismic wave swept through the building. And you're leaving 30 minutes early? Rhonda asked. Go Jack, go Jack, go Jack, chanted Garrett, one of the IT guys. At Tommy's restaurant, Jack ordered fried oysters and a Coke. After finishing his meal, he had to agree that hot ham and cheese with olive dressing was still his favorite dish. But you never know until you try it, he said aloud. Michelle was already waiting for him and smiled broadly as she ran up to greet him. This suit is much more comfortable than the old fussy one, she complimented, stroking his arm. Hi, Bubbles. You look good too. He smiled. She laughed with pleasure at being called Bubbles. He was much more relaxed and was really enjoying the lesson. Well, back to the kids, Michelle said as Kizzy congratulated everyone on a great lesson. I'm sure Barry is getting hungry by now. Barry? Oh, yes, 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 little guy. Jack smiled. How are the little ones doing? Mealy has gotten to the point of asking why we can't live with Daddy most of the time. Mandy is starting to whine about it too. But that's only because Miley whines about it. And as long as Barry has a dry diaper, he's happy, Michelle admitted. See you next Wednesday, Bubbles, Jack smiled. I'll make up a nickname for you, Michelle threatened. Yeah, I can't wait, Jack said. Percy was the next of his children to call Jack to complain about their mother. Daddy, please do something, Percy whined. She's been here for 2 days and Addison is already ready to kill her or me. What am I, an enforcer? Jack asked. That was exactly what Jacqueline had asked him when he'd called her to tell her to get out of Percy's 2-bedroom apartment. My apartment only costs $4.25 a month, You can't tell me you can't afford $4.25 a month, can you? Jack asked her. I got laid off from my job, Jack. It's hard to rent an apartment with no money, Jacqueline muttered. Jacqueline, we sold the house, Jack reminded her. We each got a check for $42,000. What happened to all that money? No, she didn't answer his question, only begged him to reconsider his decision to reconcile. Do you remember what you answered me when I asked you if you wanted to go to the Catskills? Jack asked. On my last vacation. I said, hey, why don't we go to the Catskills? We really liked it there the last time we went. Do you remember what you said? No, you know I don't remember, she snapped back. But I'm sure you remember. You said, why bother? Well, Jacqueline, why bother? Make peace, why? Jack said. Penelope let her mother know that as much as she loved her, there was simply no room for her in her apartment. Besides, Mom, you hate dogs. And Samson and Delilah were here first, Penelope said, while her two Irish wolfhounds whined and begged for attention. Chapter 3. So, Jack, where do you think you're going? Jill asked as he strolled past her cubicle with suit in hand. I beg your pardon? He laughed. I don't ask you where you're going every time you walk out of here. Yeah, but I don't smile like that every time I walk out of here either, she smiled. Jack knew that if he told Jill about this before the first cup of coffee was even poured the next morning, every employee at St. Elizabeth's Outreach Services would know about it. They all knew he was divorcing Jacqueline, and they all knew why. Women would come up to him and call Jacqueline a bitch and tell Jack that not all women are like that. And to make matters worse, men were either silently patting him on the back or avoiding him altogether. Okay, Jill, but you mustn't tell anyone, Jack said. Oh, you know I won't tell, Jill promised. Well, every Wednesday, after the divorce. How am I going to live on half, huh? Jack said. I know that, bitch, agreed Jill. But anyway, every Wednesday I make a few extra bucks modeling in ULD art classes, Jack whispered. You what? Jill asked, looking at him in disbelief. Yeah, at the University of Louisiana at DeHardy? Jack asked. And what? They have these art classes? $100 to get naked and just stand there. I mean, the first time I did that? God, I was so embarrassed. One girl said she was about to run out of red paint when she tried to knock my blush off. But after that? Jack managed to run to his car before bursting into laughter. He was still chuckling when he walked into Kizzy's. Okay, Jackhammer, what's so funny? Michelle demanded, grabbing his arm. He blushed, but told her what he had told the notorious gossip girl at his workplace. Both he and Michelle laughed amicably, with her covering her mouth with a dainty hand. I'd pay to draw you, she admitted, as Kizzy turned to the class. So, Jackhammer, are you ready? Michelle teased. Yeah, that's what all the ladies call me, Jack said, and Michelle immediately blushed. That's not what I meant, she shrieked, slapping him on the arm. Problems? Kizzy smiled. Yeah, she hit me, Jack complained mockingly. You should have heard what he said, Michelle complained. I'll think of another nickname, Michelle promised as they danced. Whatever you say, Bubbles, Jack smiled and spun her around. That's it, Kizzy encouraged. Several other couples were also cheering them on, and Jack and Michelle smiled widely. Me? You want to? Jack stammered when Kizzy announced the end of the class. Michelle smiled at him. Her smile didn't make him any less nervous, but he made a decision. Why don't we grab a cup of coffee? He asked. I can't, Michelle said. Don't forget, I'm breastfeeding. Oh hell, I didn't even think of that, Jack agreed. But what about the big malt at Clark's? Michelle smiled, taking his hand in hers. Yeah, that sounds awesome, Jack agreed, smiling through his blush. We'll take your car? Michelle decided. But when she stepped outside and saw Jack driving the smart car, she nudged him toward her minivan. I'm not getting in one of those, she declared. It's like trying to fit a basketball into a golf ball. Come on, they're much bigger than they look, Jack protested, but still got into her minivan. She sent her parents a text message, letting them know she was staying at Clark's. Yes, it's a date, she replied to her mother's question. And no sooner had they driven less than 2 miles from Kizzy's dance school to Clark's drive-in than Michelle's cell phone buzzed no less than 8 times. Do you want to answer it? Jack asked. God, no, it's my family trying to drive me crazy, she replied, glancing at the display. Michelle still took the large chocolate malt and Jack chose the vanilla cone with dip. So, Jack Rabbit, why did you decide to take up dancing? Michelle asked, watching the waitress remove herself. Jack Rabbit, huh? Jack smiled. Yeah, that's what my girlfriends call me. Geez, never mind, Michelle laughed as her phone buzzed again. And stop looking at all those girls in shorts, she demanded. Oh, I was just thinking how good you look in them, Jack muttered before his brain could tell him to shut up. And before she could respond, a police cruiser pulled into the doorway next to them. Michelle shrieked as her older brother stepped out of the police car. Are you having trouble with your cell phone? Officer Richard Voisin asked his younger sister. No, I'm ignoring it just like you, she snapped back. Uh-huh, Richard smirked. Hi, Jack began. Jonathan Archibald Hebert, Sr., said Richard. I checked the tags on your car. Really? Michelle exclaimed. I can't even buy my own malt? Richard playfully pinched his sister's nose. After what Brian did to you, huh? Richard said. Well, not without us checking him out, yeah? He nodded to Jack. Don't worry about not answering your phone, he said as he prepared to circle the car. I've already let everyone know Jack's okay. I hate you, she shouted at him. Yeah, I love you too, Richard said as he opened his door. We'll have to bring him back on Sunday. Jack chuckled, and a moment later Michelle laughed as well. I'm so sorry about this, she said. Gosh, what an awkward first date, huh? Really? I think it's a great first date, Jack said. And that's exactly what I'm going to call you. She shrieked shrilly, taking a big gulp of malt. Archibald, huh? Oh. Oh God, don't, he protested. Oh, but it's Avci, isn't it? She teased. Her phone buzzed a few more times, but she ignored it while they ate their ice cream. When she pulled up next to his car, the only one in the parking lot of Kizzy's dance school, they continued to talk quietly. Michelle could see that Jack was getting more and more nervous. Achi, are you trying to kiss me? She finally asked. Yes, he admitted. She tugged at his shirt and kissed him. Give me your phone number. You're coming over for Sunday dinner whether you want to or not, she said when they parted. 31 messages? She asked, glancing at her cell phone display again. Really? After another long kiss, Jack got out of her car and opened his car door. He smiled, waved, and drove off, leaving her to answer the 31 messages. Chapter 4. Jack entered the building and Whitney, a pretty girl with an uncovered head who sat at the front desk in the lobby, blushed as she greeted him. On the third floor, some women blushed. Others avoided looking him in the eye. A few men chuckled. Garrett smiled and gave him a thumbs up. Then Jack remembered what he'd said to Jill the previous evening and couldn't keep from laughing out loud. You're not going to tell anyone, are you? He asked Jill when he saw her in the break room. Oh, but I didn't, she denied, painting a mask of guilt on her face. He looked normal that Sunday, especially considering he was wearing a Saints pullover shirt and khakis. And see? He knows how to tuck his shirt into his pants, Michelle's father, Barry Voisin, told Michelle's older brother. Mr. Avci, are we going swimming at your house again? Amelia, Millie Melanson asked. I'm sorry, dear, but I don't live in this house anymore, replied Jack. Just then, he remembered that his apartment complex had a swimming pool. Quite often, he would come home from work and see various beautiful and not-so-beautiful bodies in and around the pool. But my apartment has a pool, he said. So we can swim in your apartment? Mandy asked. I don't mind, agreed Jack. Do you really want to see that body in a swimsuit? Michelle whispered. Whispered Michelle. Whispered Michelle. Good God, yes, said Jack firmly. You're so bad, she laughed loudly. He checked himself, especially when he told Barry and Richard that he usually went to Red's sports bar to watch the Saints play. They had the hottest wings, yeah. I swear you couldn't feel your tongue after them. Do they still have wingers like that? Barry asked. Yes, replied both Jack and Richard. If anyone thought it a little odd that Michelle's beau was 20 years older than her, no one said anything. Jack and Barry reached for the last biscuit to eat the last bit of rice and gravy and stewed steak. Marie Voisin tapped the spoon on Barry's knuckles. Yes, he's our guest. Give him that biscuit, she ordered her husband. But I need that biscuit, Barry whined, patting himself on his voluminous belly. Look, I'm about to melt, yeah. Well, I wouldn't want that to happen, Jack said. Go ahead and get you the last one. No, you look hungrier than I am. Barry smiled broadly. Okay, I'll see you Wednesday, Jack said as he said goodbye to Michelle's 6 siblings, Millie and Mandy, as well as her mom and dad. Do I have to wait that long? Michelle asked. Well, no. We can go to side by side and then foxtrots. We've practiced enough already, haven't we? Jack said. Oh, side by side? Marie asked. Shit, Barry, why don't you take me to side by side, eh? Because I'm cheap, yeah, said Barry. We'll take my van, yeah. I'm not getting in that thing you call a car, Michelle said, wrinkling her nose at his smart car. What are you talking about? About this? It's a Mercedes-Benz, yes, Jack said. It's not a Mercedes-Benz, Michelle smirked. No, it's a Mercedes-Benz, Jack said. They hugged and kissed for as long as they felt comfortable with her whole family watching, and then Jack promised he'd be there at 6:30 the next night. Jack was amazed at how easily he reverted to the dialect of his youth. His mother's parents spoke almost no English, mostly Cajun French. His father's parents spoke heavily accented English and switched to their Cajun French when they were upset or agitated. Many conversations at the dinner table consisted of a mixture of English and Cajun French. When Henry Jonathan Hebert and Eliza Cynthia Arnaud Hebert wanted to hide something from their children's ears, they spoke to each other in Cajun French. They had no idea that all three of their boys understood Cajun French. Through high school and college, Jack gradually lost that accent. Working as an administrator at St. Elizabeth Community Services, he tried to pronounce words clearly without a Cajun accent. But an afternoon at his desk at work brought Voisin back to his heritage. He logged onto the internet, found the phone number for Side by Side Steakhouse, and left a message asking for a reservation for two for the following evening at 6:45. Not even a call from his ex-wife spoiled his good mood. Hey Jack, it's me, she purred. I see, he replied, trying not to switch to a Cajun accent. Jacqueline mocked that accent when she was out of his parents' sight. She also mocked their kitchen, calling it unhealthy. Despite what you all believe, fat is not food, she sneered. So Jack tried not to give Jacqueline any reason to take shots at him. So how's it going? She asked. You know what? Yeah, fine, Jack said, and then added grumpily. Well, I finally did it. I broke down and bought myself a little apartment, said Jacqueline. That's good to hear, Jack agreed. And I thought you might want to come over to my place. Jacqueline cooed, putting on a fake charm. What? Why? Jack asked. Well, to look at the apartment, I'll make the stuffed bell peppers that used to be your favorite, remember? Jacqueline said. Jacqueline, I don't think so, said Jack. And just like that, Jacqueline's false cheerfulness was swept away. She became whiny, self-pitying. She added that none of their children wanted to talk to her anymore. I mean, Deirdre, my baby girl, abandoned me. Can you imagine? She sobbed. Well, I'm busy tomorrow, Jack resigned himself. How about Wednesday? Jacqueline quickly suggested, her tears drying as quickly as they had started. No, I have plans for Wednesday too, Jack said. Do what? Jacqueline asked. Jack briefly told her the same thing he had told Jill. I'm going to take a course at school, tighten up my knowledge, he said. It wasn't a complete lie. For years he had taken courses at the University of Louisiana, at DeHardy, and he had tightened up his skills. He just didn't feel like telling her that he was improving his dancing skills. How about Tuesday then? She suggested. Yeah, okay, he replied. At 10:30 on Monday morning, a girl named Lassie called his cell phone and confirmed that he had a reservation for two at Side by Side Restaurant for 6:40 that evening. We look forward to seeing you, Mr. Hebert, the girl said pleasantly. Not as much as I am, Jack joked, and Lacey giggled. Michelle giggled too when Jack called her to remind her that they had a date tonight. Like I'm thinking about anything else? She asked. With the words, love you, Michelle disconnected the call. Jacqueline hadn't said love you until they'd known each other for almost a year, and that was in response to his own declaration of love. And Jacqueline didn't call him any affectionate words. The only time she called him honey or baby was when she needed something. Again at 6:30, Jack had to greet Michelle's entire family. Mother and father, brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces. She only had one nephew named Richie, Mealy, Mandy, and Barry, who gave him a toothless grin. Michelle was wearing a dress that was a little small for her. It was obviously her best dress, and it had obviously been bought for her quite some time ago. Jack guessed that the dress had been bought before Amelia was pregnant. Damn, Bubbles, I need to go home and get dressed up, Jack said. even though he was wearing a great black pinstripe suit, white shirt, and blood-red tie. "What, you look good?" she asked. "Yeah, but not as good as you, no," he said, and she blushed with pride. "Why don't you say something like that, huh?" Marie asked Barry. "Because then I would say it all the time, yes," replied Barry, and kissed his wife. "Oh, you're lying," she laughed and kissed him. "I'll give you all a police escort," Richard joked. "If you do, I'll kill you," Michelle threatened. "Ah, yes, Mr. Heber," the restaurant hostess greeted them. "This way." Michelle looked around the posh restaurant in awe. The best place Brian had ever taken her to was Casa Ole Mexican Restaurant. There were no prices on the menu, and she pondered that little fact. "Honey, it's so you don't have to worry about what you order," Jack said quietly. He took her small hand in his. "You'll get whatever you want," he said. "Whenever we're together, you'll get everything you want, you hear?" Looking into his brown eyes, Michelle felt her insides turn to liquid. "I love you, yes," she whispered. Then her big brown eyes got even bigger and her mouth opened in a soundless sigh. "I mean," she tried to correct herself. "Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that because I love you," Jack smiled. "Really?" Michelle gasped. The ribeye was cooked perfectly. The outside was cooked through, retaining the natural juices of the thick piece of meat, and the inside was light pink. Michelle tried to finish it, but was only able to eat half of it. Jack managed to eat a whole bone, but both agreed that dessert would have to wait. Chapter 5. "How's the day changed, huh?" Jill asked, when Jack came out of the office dressed in his usual Wednesday jeans and shirt. "Huh?" Jack asked. "Said that. Well, yesterday you walked out of here like your dog was dead," Jill remarked. "And today, you've got a Wednesday night smile on your face." Jack smiled even wider and headed for the elevator. Last night he had gone to his ex-wife's new apartment. Jacqueline had rented a 2-bedroom apartment. It was about 200 square feet larger than Jack's. The complex wasn't bad. There were no disabled cars in the parking lot, the grounds were clean. The interior was clean, simple, with white walls and beige carpet. Stuffed peppers were fine. Jacqueline had prepared a broccoli casserole for the peppers, which she baked in the oven. Before the feeding began, the Voisin household bowed their heads in prayer. As Sunday lunch began, Jack began praying, blessing the food. "I'm not poisoning you, you may not pray," Jacqueline chided him as he bowed his head. During dinner, Jacqueline complained. She complained about the high rent, the expensive furniture, the boring courtwork, the noisy neighbors. She spoke again of reconciliation. "Did you hear me?" Jacqueline asked, trying not to betray her irritation. Jack finished his casserole, took a sip of cloudy iced tea, and turned to face her. "What made you want to cheat on me?" he asked bluntly. Straightforwardly, he asked. "What does that have to do with it?" Jacqueline hissed. "It has everything to do with that," said Jack. He put the napkin down on the table. "Jacqueline, for some reason you decided to go and entertain Brian Melanson. I told you not to do it. I told you I didn't agree with it. I told you it would cost you our marriage, but you went anyway. The only reason you didn't? I kind of screwed it up, didn't I?" "I really didn't think," Jacqueline admitted weakly. "I know you really didn't think I'd fight back so hard. Didn't think I'd leave or divorce you. Didn't think you wouldn't get your way like you always do," Jack sighed. "See?" Jacqueline exclaimed shrilly. "You're as much to blame for this as I am. You're always—" "Jacqueline, I've never heard you apologize," he said, and rose to his feet. "You're not done yet. You still have—" Jacqueline protested. "Oh yes, I'm done," Jack said and headed for her door. "Don't call me again, huh? We have nothing to talk about." He walked into Clark's and got a chili cheeseburger and a vanilla malt. "I'd be afraid to drive in that thing," the waitress admitted, looking at his little car. "Yeah, but I get 42 miles per gallon," Jack agreed cheerfully. After reaching his apartment, he and Michelle sent each other text message after text message until it was 10 o'clock in the evening. "Good night, Avsi," she sent along with a kiss. "Love you, good night," he replied. "Love you even more," she replied. "I know," he replied. He laughed when she replied with a tongue-out emoji. Today was Wednesday, and Jack was looking forward to dancing with his bubbles. Whitney wished him a good night, though a blush appeared on her smooth face. A hot po' boy with ham and cheese, with olive dressing and a few drops of hot sauce, and Jack was full and ready. Michelle exclaimed and rushed over to greet him. "Hello, Bubbles," he smiled as he appraised her outfit. You look good, yes. They danced, Kizzy calling out the moves, correcting those that needed correction and praising those that didn't. When she announced the end of the lesson, Jack leaned over and kissed Michelle's lips softly. This? It's Brian's weekend with the kids, Michelle said symbolically. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about wanting to make love to you, Jack purred. She pulled herself up on her toes and kissed him. Okay, that sounds good, she agreed. On Thursday, Jack talked to Barry, Michelle's father, man to man. He learned that Michelle's wedding had been rushed and there would be no honeymoon. So Jack planned a romantic weekend getaway. And on Friday, he left work at noon. Jack couldn't keep from laughing. Jacqueline's Mercedes-Benz was parked in the Superior parking lot. They called them used, but even the salesman had to agree they were used cars. You know what? Yeah, let me have this one, Jack agreed, and bought Jacqueline's car. Then he went to his tiny apartment and packed his suitcase. His good mood soured a little when he pulled up in front of the Voisin house and saw Brian Melançon struggling with Barry and Mandy's car seat. Millie was already sitting in the front seat of the car, wearing her seatbelt. Just then, a thought struck Jack. Let me do it, he said, taking Barry from Brian. And you take Mandy. Hi, Mr. Avsey, Millie greeted him. You're not going to hit me, are you? Brian asked fearfully. Huh? No, go ahead and take her, Jack said, quickly attaching Barry's car seat attachment to the seat bar. He then walked over to Millie, kissed her forehead, and kissed Mandy too. Do you have a minute? I need to talk to you, Jack turned to Brian. Are you doing anything? How about Monday night? Monday night? No, I'm not doing anything, Brian agreed. Jack then helped Michelle with her suitcase. The trip took 2 hours during which all they did was talk, get to know each other. Michelle told him that Brian was a friend of Richard's and had always been so kind to her. I mean, I know I'm fat, but he always says hi to me and tells me I'm beautiful, Michelle said. Hi, you're beautiful, Jack said. And because I'm allergic to latex, said Michelle. I bet I know what you're trying to say, Jack said. He puckered his lips slightly. He'd bought a 12-pack of condoms, but if Michelle turned out to be allergic to latex, they would either have to give them up or take their chances. Jack hoped they would take the risk. Michelle hoped they'd take the risk too. Traffic in Baton Rouge was a regular nightmare, and Jack breathed a sigh of relief when they finally ended up in Gonzales. Bourbon Street was a real eye-opener for a girl who had never traveled outside of Degard, Louisiana. Café du Monde was a delight. Jack had arranged for them to eat there every day. But as night enveloped the city in velvet warmth, Michelle took Jack's hand and looked at him with her big brown eyes. Let's go back to the room, she suggested. Chapter 6. She chatted non-stop on the walk to the hotel, chatted non-stop in the rickety old elevator, and chatted non-stop while he fiddled with the keycard. Bubbles, are you nervous? Jack asked quietly. No, Michelle denied, and then nodded her head, leaning against his chest. I'm all fat, she admitted. And you're all pretty too, Jack said. He didn't deny that she was fat. She was about 40 to 50 pounds overweight, and she knew it. Any attempt on his part to deny that she was overweight would have looked disingenuous and dishonest. So Jack told Michelle the truth. She was beautiful. Whether she was fat or not, she was beautiful. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched him turn off the 2 lamps in the room. Then they got down to business. Chapter 7. Brian looked nervous, anxious. Jack ordered a cup of coffee, asked the girl behind the counter to add evaporated milk, then walked over to the table. Hey, Brian, how's it going? Jack asked, nodding in greeting as he lowered himself onto the bench across from Brian. Good. I'm fine. How are you? Brian stuttered. Yeah, good. I've got some black bean soup simmering in the pot waiting for me to get home, Jack said and sipped his coffee. So what do you want to talk to me about? Brian broached the subject. Why does my wife want to cheat on me? Muttered Jack, deciding to get straight to the point. Huh? Brian asked. He was running through several scenarios in his head, but Jack's direct question didn't fit into any of the scenarios he had thought up. Jack gulped down the scalding hot coffee and set the cup aside. Everything she asked for, I gave her. That huge monster house? God, how I hated that place, but Jacqueline just had to have it. Her car? She had a nice Lincoln, but she just had to have her Mercedes-Benz, Jack said. He looked at Brian. I'm just trying to figure myself out, he admitted. Giving her everything she wants, never cheating on her, never hitting her, never gambling. And then she just up and says she's going to have a little affair and I'm trying to figure out why. She was getting older, Brian said. And so am I. We're all getting older, Jack muttered. Brian held up a hand. You said you wanted to know why, but I can't tell you if you're too busy running your mouth, Brian said. They looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Jack nodded his head in agreement. She's getting a little older, Brian continued, and our youngest isn't home anymore, Dee or Debbie or something. Deirdre, Jack agreed. And she feels old, unwanted, Brian continued. He smiled and shrugged. All it took was, wow, you look nice today. And you actually have a daughter old enough to go to college. And Jacqueline smiled and laughed, Brian admitted. Heck, I kept telling her she looked good, Jack grumbled angrily. Yeah, but from you? That doesn't count, Brian said. You're the husband. But that doesn't mean you can get away with not telling her about it. It just doesn't count. Brian drained his cup of coffee and looked at the counter. Come on, Jack said. Bring another one. Brian did so and returned. Anyway, she smiles at me, flirts with me a little. She's flattered that a man much younger than her is showing her attention, Brian said. He blew on his cup and twitched when his lips made contact with the hot mug. Hot, Jack agreed, sipping his coffee. That's how I screwed Cindy, the school secretary Stacy, the chemistry teacher, and the one Michelle caught me with, Brian said. Both men sat for a long time. All it takes is a little attention and then they start talking about their husband. He doesn't pay attention to them, doesn't take them out to eat, and would rather sit on his ass and watch TV, Brian said. He took a sip of his coffee and wrinkled his nose slightly at the heat. You just bought yourself this smart car, Brian remembered. And as soon as I asked her if you regretted the Saints' losing season so far, she started telling me about all your faults. Brian shrugged. Huh? He bought himself a new car? And it's impractical? What a selfish bastard, Brian suggested. Huh? He doesn't take you to the dance? He prefers to watch football? I bet he and you aren't exactly smooth in the bedroom either, right? Who cares? Monday through Sunday I bust my ass for her, Jack snorted. Most husbands do, Brian admitted. But all I have to do is hint that it's not enough. Jack emptied his mug, though the coffee had already managed to become bitter in his stomach. Is Michelle in love with you? He asked, more to himself than to Brian. Is she? Always been the fat one, and all you had to do was tell her she was cute, Brian scoffed. Worst piece of... He stammered, remembering seeing Jack outside Michelle's house the previous Friday. So when the serpent left the Garden of Eden, he became an English teacher, Jack thought as he rose to his feet. He had to smile, however. Brian Melanson was a skilled seducer, but Michelle had told Jack that Brian Melanson wasn't very skillful at lovemaking. Jack gave a strained smile, said goodnight to Brian, and walked out of Jitter's coffee shop. Jack made his way to his little apartment, ate some black bean soup, and then added some more hot sauce to it, and he and Michelle sent each other text message after text message. Tuesday morning, Jack not only woke up with a smile, he'd been waking up with a smile on his face for a long time, but he didn't feel like a failure, a loser. He had long been plagued by those pesky questions. Why had Jacqueline decided to cheat? Was this really her first time cheating? Why did he fail in his role as husband, breadwinner? But now it was much clearer to him that he had not failed. He may have been distracted, so to speak, but it was not his failure. He also realized that he had outgrown the bachelor apartment he was renting. Epilogue. Today was the 12th class. Jack signed them up for 12 more classes and paid for lessons for both himself and Michelle, although Barry, Michelle's father, offered to help out a little. What? Why? It's not like you're dancing with her, Jack smiled, watching as Millie held onto one arm and Mandy the other. Now tell me again why we have to go to McDonald's. Because, Mr. Afshi, they have hamburgers and fries and you can get a malt and then go and play on the slide they have there. Millie patiently explained why they had to go to McDonald's to eat dinner. They also got a prize in the box, Mandy agreed. Now, as Jack and Michelle spun around on the dance floor, dancing together with fluidity and beauty of movement, Jack smiled at Michelle. She smiled back at him, her face flushed with happiness. It's hard to believe that 12 weeks ago you couldn't tell your left hand from your right, Kizzy praised. The music began to fade and Jack released Michelle from his embrace. Then, as Michelle spun in the opposite direction, he dropped to one knee. Michelle looked at him confusedly. And the other couple stopped and looked at Jack and Michelle, who were standing in the center of the large hall. Michelle Voisin, I love you with all my heart, Jack said loudly and firmly. Will you marry me? He held out a beautiful yellow gold ring with a 1-carat diamond surrounded by 4 smaller diamonds. Michelle admired the ring, then grabbed Jack and plowed him to the floor, lying on top of him and kissing him frantically. Oh, Achi! She exclaimed and laughed. The other couples applauded, laughing as Jack struggled to get to his feet. I take it that's a yes. Kizzy laughed as Michelle finally got off Jack. And you're all going to my wedding. Do you hear me? Michelle ordered, looking at her ring. Really, Daddy? JJ teased as Jack called to tell him the good news. My stepmom is younger than me. Not that. Deirdre pretended to be upset that she would no longer be the baby of the family. Mealy assured Deirdre that she would enjoy being a big sister. It's great, she explained. I'll be able to go to bed a whole 15 minutes longer because I'll be a big sister. Then, you mean I'll be able to go to bed 15 minutes longer than you? Deirdre asked cheerfully. Yes, Millie assured her. Daddy, why do they keep calling you Mr. Achi? Percy asked as they all walked around Jack's new house. JJ, Shauna holding her son Trey, Percy, and his wife Addison, whose 8-month pregnant belly seemed ready to pop out, Penelope and her partner Alyssa, and Deirdre turned to hear the explanation. When I first saw Michelle, I called her Bubbles, Jack said. Bubbles? Alyssa asked, and the Cupid doll's face crinkled in a smile. I don't know. She was just so fussy and pudgy. That's what came out, Jack admitted. And then I found out his middle name is Archibald, Michelle said, taking his hand in hers. And he's a big Saints fan. Penelope nodded her head understandingly. Archie Manning is still the Saints' greatest quarterback. JJ, Percy, and Penelope repeated what they had heard all their lives. While Millie and Mandy were showing their new older siblings the pegs marking the spot where the pool would be dug, Deirdre squatted down next to her father. Sorry, Daddy, I let it slip a little that you and Michelle are getting married next Saturday, Deirdre confessed. Honey, so what? I'm not keeping it a secret from your mother, Jack shrugged. He smiled when Millie promised Shauna that she would teach Trey how to swim. Well, she's a little mad, Deirdre said. It's her own fault, Jack said. It's her own damn fault. The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.